Imagine waking up today and finding out a 2-week-old startup just launched a product that would have taken a billion-dollar tech giant an entire year to pull off.
Right. A whole year of work done in 14 days by just a handful of people. It's wild.
It really is. And, that isn't some futuristic sci-fi hypothetical. That is literally the new physics of the business world we are operating in right now.
Exactly. The foundation of what's possible isn't just like shifting, it's practically liquefying under our feet.
Yeah, and we've custom-tailored this specific deep dive for you today because we know you're staring down this massively shifting landscape, right?
Yeah.
You're trying to figure out how to position yourself without getting completely washed away.
Which is a very real fear right now for a lot of people.
Oh, absolutely. So our mission today is to unpack the mental models of Sam Altman, the CEO of OpenAI. We've got a really fascinating stack of source material from a recent interview with him.
Yeah, and we're looking to extract his specific frameworks, things like navigating hypergrowth, managing extreme chaos, and preparing for this era of superintelligence.
Right, so you can map these insights directly onto your own daily reality. Because, it requires a complete paradigm shift in how you view productivity.
It really does. The compression of time we're seeing, it just changes the very nature of ambition.
Okay, let's unpack this, starting with the sheer velocity of that time compression, because the source material highlights a meeting Altman had with a startup that was barely 14 days old.
2 weeks.
2 weeks. And in that time, this tiny team had built an entirely re-architected office productivity suite. Yeah, they engineered a system where the AI treats documents, spreadsheets, and presentations as, first-class consumers.
Meaning the AI isn't just a chatbot sitting on the side of the screen.
Exactly. It natively reads, manipulates, and generates the actual workspace. Work of that magnitude, even just 18 months ago, would have demanded a massive, heavily funded engineering team.
Oh, for sure. And this extreme compression of time and cost, that's what gives new entrants this massive, almost unfair advantage.
Because the legacy companies are stuck.
Yeah, when the ground shifts this violently, the legacy companies are bogged down trying to retrofit their old infrastructure. But startups, they can build natively, right on the fault line.
Right, but adapting your own psychology to that reality, that is where most people stumble, because the temptation to take the easy path is just overwhelming right now.
Oh, completely. Altman points out a massive trap that founders are falling into.
Because these AI models are so intrinsically powerful, you can easily just build an AI agent for enterprise vertical X.
Right. You automate a narrow workflow for lawyers or accountants, and it will absolutely work. You will generate revenue.
But by grabbing that low-hanging fruit, you are completely ignoring the opportunity to take a massive swing at fundamentally rewiring an industry.
Yeah, and taking that massive swing, it requires this profound, almost instinctual trust in exponentials.
Right.
When we talk about AI scaling laws, we're talking about a mathematical reality where pumping more compute and more data into a network yields predictably better performance. It doesn't, flatten out into a linear progression.
But understanding an exponential curve intellectually, like on a whiteboard, that's simple.
Sure.
But actually risking your capital, your time, and your career on the assumption that the technology will be drastically more capable in 2 years, that goes against all our human survival instinct.
It really does. We are wired to plan for tomorrow based on exactly what we saw yesterday.
Yeah, I look at the current tech landscape like a massive surfing competition. You literally cannot catch a wave in a perfectly calm, flat ocean.
The volatility is the engine.
Exactly. Startups have this incredible edge precisely because the water is so choppy. But looking at the broader market, it seems like we're collectively suffering from a failure of imagination,
How do you mean?
Well, if people are just blindly applying today's AI models to yesterday's linear business problems, aren't they building products that will be obsolete before they even launch?
Oh, absolutely. If you build for the friction that exists this month, you are already behind. You have to extrapolate the scaling laws and build for the reality of 4 years from now.
Even if that reality seems technically impossible today.
Right. And this requires filtering out the noise and identifying what is genuinely shifting the tectonic plates.
Which brings us to his highly practical framework for identifying real versus fake trends. And this is an incredible filter for you to apply when deciding where to invest your own time.
It's a great model.
Altman uses virtual reality as the textbook fake trend. It generates massive hype, people buy the headset, they play with it for a weekend, and then It goes into a drawer.
Right, it just collects dust.
Yeah.
And the crucial mechanism there isn't the technology itself, it's the lack of behavioral integration. Users do not design their daily routines around it.
But you contrast that with a real trend, like the adoption of ChatGPT. The defining characteristic of a real trend is behavioral permanence.
Exactly. Even if a user's engagement fluctuates, like maybe they rely on it for 4 hours on a Tuesday and then barely touch it on a Wednesday, it remains a persistent, enduring fixture in their workflow.
The technology effectively alters their daily habits completely permanently. But grasping the math of an exponential curve is, well, it's entirely different from surviving the whiplash of actually living on one.
Oh, absolutely.
If the market landscape is shifting that rapidly, how do you wake up every day and make decisions without completely losing your nerve? This transitions into a critical focus of the source material.
Right, the internal mechanics of managing extreme chaos. Because having an intellectual framework for disruption is useless if your nervous system just redlines every time something goes wrong.
And the sources make it very clear that emotional resilience in the face of chaos is not something you can just, absorb from a management book. It demands reps, real physical, emotional reps.
Yeah, Altman observes that the very first time you face an event that threatens to kill your company, your body reacts as if a tiger is chasing you.
The sky is falling.
Right, the sky is falling. But by the 10th time you face a company-killing crisis, you look at the problem, realize you survived the previous 9, and you logically assess the variables.
It functions exactly like exposure therapy. First-time founders or operators stepping into hyper-growth environments, they often lack this specific career scar tissue.
Right, and because they haven't reached a baseline of emotional peace with chaos, they panic. They make unforced errors.
The ability to trust that you will figure out a solution, even when the immediate path forward is completely opaque, is highly learnable, but fundamentally unteachable. You have to earn it through friction.
And earning it through friction ties into a highly philosophical approach to pain that Altman brings up. He references Naval Ravikant's thought experiment about a hypothetical fast-forward button for your life.
Oh, this was fascinating. Imagine having a remote control where you could just skip past all the stressful board meetings, the painful breakups, the sleepless nights, the boring commutes.
If you press that button, your life would be over in a flash.
Exactly. The underlying realization is that the opposite of a bad experience isn't a good experience. The opposite of a bad experience is no experience at all.
What's fascinating here is how adopting that specific mindset fundamentally alters your relationship with daily stress.
Yeah, how so?
Well, if you truly internalize that, eventually you will arrive in no experience land, meaning you will be dead. You can actually manufacture genuine gratitude for the chaotic, grueling days.
Because the stress and the pain provide the contrast required for emotional depth. They're the essential friction that makes your narrative worth living.
Right. And the ultimate stress test for this mindset was Altman's global tour following the release of GPT-4.
Oh man, yeah. 3 years ago when that model dropped, the global reaction wasn't just excitement, it was existential panic.
World leaders were convening, discussing whether this technology needed to be immediately halted. The regulatory anxiety was off the charts.
And rather than issuing press releases, Altman realized he had to physically face the music. He executed a completely brutal marathon, 28 countries in 35 days.
It's just an insane schedule. When geopolitical tensions are escalating and the fundamental safety of humanity is being questioned, you cannot manage that from behind a screen in San Francisco.
Yo, you can't. He practically lived on an airplane. The source notes he flew coach, though, to be fair, it was a specialized coach seat that converted into a bed.
Still, the physical toll was profound. He discovered firsthand that all the biohacked jet lag cures are completely useless when you push the human body that hard.
Yeah, his brain eventually rejected the shifting time zones entirely. By the end of the tour, his exhaustion reached a level where his subconscious actively rebelled. He would wake up in these disorienting states where he actually believed he was back in his childhood bedroom.
Wow. And that level of physical sacrifice is the manifestation of his core operational heuristic, which is get on planes in marginal situations.
Right, when the outcome is entirely uncertain and the stakes are highest, physical presence is the only way to alter the dynamic. The friction of showing up in person communicates a level of commitment that fundamentally changes the negotiation.
It really does.
But, I am fully on board with the value of physical presence. But the source material presents a massive contradiction in how he manages his daily mental state.
You're talking about his phone habits.
Yeah. On one hand, he preaches this philosophy of enduring chaos by maintaining a calm, long-term focus. He claims he doesn't rigidly reverse engineer a 20-year plan, but rather plans forward from his current reality, anchored by deeply held convictions.
Keeping the core mission inflexible while remaining entirely fluid on the tactical execution.
Right. Yet, in the exact same conversation, he reveals a daily habit that seems entirely antithetical to calm, deep thinking. He admits to texting between 300 and 400 people every single day.
It's a staggering number.
It is. He explicitly compares his own biological brain to an AI model equipped with a hyperactive, massive short-term context window.
Right. He absorbs a random piece of cutting-edge research at 9 a.m., uses it to make a high-stakes pivot at 2 p.m., and effectively flushes it from his memory by dinner.
But treating your brain like a high-frequency trading algorithm seems like a guaranteed way to obliterate your capacity for deep focus. Doesn't this constant context switching inherently destroy the ability to form those long-term convictions in the first place?
It is a striking paradox, and he acknowledges the potential detriment, but it reveals a very specific optimization strategy.
Okay, what is it?
He is deliberately sacrificing deep, isolated contemplation in exchange for supreme, real-time situational awareness.
Interesting.
Yeah, by forcing his brain to process that massive daily input, he builds a continuous, high-resolution map of the entire technological landscape.
And that real-time map allows him to steer a massive organization with micro-adjustments, exploiting those shifting tectonic plates we discussed earlier much faster than someone sitting in a quiet room thinking deeply.
Exactly.
But pointing that situational awareness and emotional resilience in the wrong direction is just a fast track to burnout. The chaos only pays dividends if you are ruthlessly targeting the absolute right objectives. So how do you translate that high-frequency data into execution? This forces us to look at his framework for the critical path and the necessity of aligning human incentives.
Because for OpenAI, the North Star is completely unambiguous. It's the creation of abundant, cheap, decentralized intelligence. Every single action has to serve that ultimate mission.
And to achieve that, he ignores the superficial layers of the business and looks at the foundational physics of the problem.
Right. The bottlenecks preventing abundant intelligence are not marketing budgets or user interface design.
No, the ultimate bottlenecks are physical. Transistors and electrons, the sheer volume of advanced chips, and the massive electrical grids required to power them.
And overcoming those physical constraints requires human coordination and capital allocation on a scale that is almost impossible to comprehend.
Which leads to his deeply analytical view of economic history. When asked about the most important invention of the Industrial Revolution, he doesn't point to the steam engine or the mechanical loom.
No, he points to the joint stock corporation.
Right, because before the corporate structure existed, commerce was limited by the bounds of personal trust. If you ran a family business, you could only scale as far as your immediate network of trust could reach.
You couldn't build a transcontinental railroad on a handshake.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But the Joint Stock Corporation introduced liability protection and perfected the alignment of incentives. It allowed thousands of strangers to pool speculative capital toward a massively ambitious shared goal.
Completely removing the need for personal trust between the participants. The structure itself became the trust mechanism, enabling the scale required to solve global bottlenecks.
But having the structure in place doesn't make the internal execution any less brutal. Staying on the critical path requires a willingness to slaughter your own darlings.
Oh, this is the hardest part.
Yeah, the sources highlight that the ultimate test of execution isn't having the courage to kill a failing project. It is having the absolute ruthlessness to kill a project that is working incredibly well.
This is the defining characteristic that separates a true business miracle, his term for anomalies like AWS or OpenAI, from a massive tech incumbent that becomes sclerotic.
Right, because sclerotic organizations fall in love with their own success. They build massive bureaucracies to protect their existing revenue streams and are completely terrified of cannibalizing themselves.
And the examples from OpenAI are staggering here. They had a functioning robotics division that the team was incredibly passionate about. It was making real progress.
But they shut it down entirely to focus all their mental and computational resources on the development of GPT-3.
Right, and we saw this play out again recently with Sora, their video generation AI. When Sora debuted, the public reaction was absolute awe. The fidelity was unbelievable.
It could have easily been spun out into a wildly profitable standalone entertainment business, but they shelved it. They pulled the resources to focus their compute power and energy on developing coding agents.
Which perfectly illustrates the mechanics of the critical path. Sora, for all its visual magic, is essentially a consumer product. It creates entertaining outputs. A coding agent, however, writes software.
And if you successfully engineer an AI that can autonomously write, debug, and optimize complex code, that AI can be turned inward to improve its own underlying architecture.
It creates a recursive loop of self-improvement. Coding agents are the literal stepping stones to artificial general intelligence, whereas video generation is just a distraction from that core mission.
Walking away from the immediate gratification of Sora requires a level of discipline most organizations fundamentally lack,
Completely.
which begs a massive question about human psychology. How do you possibly manage a team of human beings to pursue this massive, incredibly risky, critical path, especially when society spends decades beating that level of ambition out of us?
Yeah, Altman reflects on his time at Y Combinator, observing how the average employee entering the corporate world suffers from tall poppy syndrome.
Right, from grade school through corporate HR, they've been subtly punished for standing out, for thinking too big, or for challenging the baseline.
They arrive at the workplace practically paralyzed, waiting for a boss to hand them a permission slip.
So how do you take a human who has been conditioned for compliance and reprogram them to think exponentially?
The mechanism the source material provides is highly actionable. The deployment of small, repeated wins. You do not hand an atrophied employee a seemingly impossible, world-changing task on their first day.
That would just break them.
Right. You assign them a mandate that sits just slightly outside their current comfort zone. They execute it, they realize the sky didn't fall, and their internal perimeter of what is possible expands just a fraction.
And by compounding those micro-victories over time, you systematically rebuild their internal agency and their tolerance for ambition.
Yep.
So let's project this forward. Let's assume we navigate the shifting ground, we align the corporate incentives, we secure the transistors and electrons, and we actually succeed in building this superintelligence. What happens to the humans when the machine comes online?
This is where the tactical execution gives way to the deeply existential. The immediate conflict isn't merely about the creation of the technology. It is about the architecture of its control.
And before we get into this specific tension between authoritarian control and decentralized liberty, we need to make it absolutely clear to you listening. We are simply unpacking the viewpoints and arguments laid out in the original source material.
Right. We aren't endorsing any specific political framework or regulatory stance on AI. We're looking objectively at how this tension is being framed by those building it.
Exactly. Because looking at the source, there is a profound legitimate fear regarding the safety risks of AGI.
The natural reflex reaction from many corners is to demand that a single centralized authority, whether a megacorporation or a global government, maintain absolute control over the master model to protect humanity from itself.
But Altman argues vigorously that trading liberty for the promise of safety is historically a catastrophic net loss. Distributing this unprecedented power into the hands of the decentralized public will undeniably be messy.
Bad actors will use it for malicious purposes.
Yes, they will. But the alternative, concentrating the ultimate cognitive engine of humanity into a centralized authoritarian choke point, is a far more dangerous proposition.
Navigating the friction of an empowered populace is the necessary price for avoiding a dystopian monopoly on intelligence.
If we connect this to the bigger picture.
Right. If we connect this to the bigger picture, it forces us to confront what human beings will actually do with their existence once the struggle for basic economic output is entirely automated. For over a century, every technological leap has been accompanied by the promise of the 4-hour workweek.
A promise that never ever materializes.
Because it completely misinterprets human nature. Human expectations are not static. They scale infinitely. We are deeply tribal and highly competitive, and our baseliner for status is always relative to our peers.
Even if an AI agent can perfectly write every line of code, cure diseases, and manage the supply chain, humans will inevitably invent completely new, arbitrary domains in which to compete, struggle, and establish hierarchy.
And the vulnerability of our biology to this technology is apparent even today, long before we reach AGI.
Well, the way Altman manages his own personal tech diet is a massive red flag. He acknowledges the iPhone as arguably the greatest tool ever created, yet he was forced to disable almost all his notifications just to maintain a baseline of cognitive control.
Furthermore, he completely deleted TikTok from his life.
Yeah. During the development of Sora, he intentionally downloaded TikTok to study its engagement mechanics. He assumed he could strictly regulate his usage just 10 minutes before bed.
But that 10 minutes quietly expanded to an hour, and eventually he lost an entire Saturday afternoon completely submerged in the algorithmic feed.
When the architect of the most powerful technology on Earth admits that he cannot overpower a social media algorithm, it reveals a stark truth. Our Paleolithic brains, wired for scarcity and immediate physical threats, are entirely defenseless against hyper-optimized, artificially generated dopamine stimuli.
Which is exactly why he emphasizes the necessity of anchoring ourselves to enduring evolutionary human values. Betting against millions of years of evolutionary biology is a fool's errand.
Even in a post-scarcity world, humans will fundamentally require the friction of quests. We will seek out physical adventure.
The most grounding example he provides is the simple act of cooking for each other. Someday soon, a robotic system will be able to chemically synthesize and prepare a perfectly nutritious, flawlessly executed meal.
Yet you will still invite your friends over, open a bottle of wine, and chop vegetables by hand. Why? Because the underlying value of that act has absolutely nothing to do with the economic output of the calories.
The value is the shared friction. The creation of value won't vanish. It will simply decouple entirely from economic necessity and migrate fully toward authentic analog human connection.
It is a beautiful vision of the future, but looking at the mechanics of human psychology, I can't help but see a massive risk.
What do you mean?
Think about how human behavior operates in a video game environment. When a game is brutally difficult, you are completely engaged. Every decision matters. But the moment you type in a cheat code and activate God mode, giving yourself infinite health, infinite ammo, infinite resources, the game loses all its meaning.
Right, you wander around for 10 minutes, get incredibly bored, and turn it off.
Exactly. If superintelligent AI becomes humanity's infinite cheat code, removing all resource constraints, our biological need for status and struggle just causes us to invent new, potentially destructive games. If we're no longer fighting for survival, don't we just start fighting for entertainment?
That is the most profound unknown we face. When you remove the physical constraints that have governed human behavior since the dawn of our species, human psychology might contort in deeply unpredictable ways.
Stripped of the need to cooperate for survival, we might actually amplify our tribalism purely to generate the conflict our brains crave.
So to navigate this reality, the old rules simply do not apply. You have to force your brain to trust the math of exponentials, building for a future that feels completely counterintuitive today.
You must actively seek out the friction required to build your emotional resilience, recognizing that the painful, chaotic days are the vital contrast that gives your experience meaning.
You have to cultivate the absolute ruthlessness to stay on the critical path, brutally cutting away ideas that are merely great to ensure you have the resources to pursue what is foundational.
And as the cost of raw intelligence plummets towards zero, you must recognize that the ultimate premium in the market and in life will be placed on genuine, unoptimizable human connection. As we wrap up this deep dive, we want to leave you with a final thought to mull over regarding that human need for friction.
Yeah, if human beings are fundamentally hardwired for quests, and superintelligent AI inevitably solves all of our physical bottlenecks, intellectual mysteries, and resource constraints, will our next great frontier simply be exploring the uncharted depths of our own consciousness?
Wow.
Will we eventually reach a point where we have to artificially invent friction and struggle just to remind ourselves what it actually feels like to be alive?
That is a lot to think about. Thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive. Until next time.